A kind black waitress paid for an old man's food. Next day he changed her life. The windows of Harlan's table fogged over as rain pummeled the small town of Millbrook. Once the crown jewel of American diner chains, this particular branch had seen better days. The vinyl booths were cracked in places, the neon sign outside flickered inconsistently, and the heating system wheezed like an asthmatic marathoner. Kira Thompson wiped condensation from her forehead with the back of her hand, balancing 3 plates along her left arm with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this for 8 years. At 29, she wasn't where she'd planned to be, but as a single mother with a 7-year-old son and community college aspirations perpetually on hold, Harlan's table paid the bills. Barely. "Order up for table 7," Manuel called from the kitchen, sliding another plate onto the pass. "I've got 3 tables waiting on refills, a complaint about cold fries at table 4, and now this?" Kira muttered, glancing around the packed diner. They were short-staffed again. Tanya had called in sick, and the new hostess, Brittany, a 17-year-old with acrylic nails longer than her attention span, was more interested in her phone than in seating customers. "Don't look at me," said Brittany when Kira shot her a pleading glance. "I'm not allowed to serve. Jason said so." As if summoned by his name, Jason Mercer, the manager, emerged from his office, smartphone in hand. At 32, he'd been with the company for just over a year, brought in by the corporate owners who'd purchased the chain from its founder. His management style consisted primarily of pointing out problems without offering solutions. "Kira, table 9 has been waiting for their check for 10 minutes, he said without looking up from his screen. "And corporate's breathing down my neck about labor costs. Try to move people along faster, would you?" "I'm doing the job of 3 people, Jason," Kira replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Unless you want to grab that coffee pot and help out." Jason's expression soured. "Just do your job. And fix your hair, it's coming loose from your cap." The bell above the door jingled, and a gust of cold, wet air swept through the diner. In the doorway stood an elderly man, perhaps in his mid-70s, completely drenched. Water dripped from his weathered tweed coat onto the linoleum floor. His gray hair was plastered to his head, and his patched shoes squished as he took a tentative step inside, looking around uncertainly. "Great," Brittany whispered, loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. "Shouldn't someone call a shelter or something?" The old man's shoulders hunched slightly, but his expression remained dignified. His eyes, sharp and observant despite his bedraggled appearance, scanned the restaurant methodically, taking in every detail. When no one immediately approached him, he shuffled toward an empty booth in the corner, leaving wet footprints in his wake. Sir?" Brittany called out, holding up a hand as if stopping traffic. "Do you, actually plan to order something?" A woman at a nearby table wrinkled her nose and leaned toward her companion. "What's that smell? Is that him? Probably hasn't showered in weeks," her friend replied, not bothering to lower her voice. The old man paused, his weathered face impassive, but Kira noticed how his gnarled hands tightened on the edge of a nearby table. Without saying a word, he continued to the corner booth and eased himself into the seat, wincing slightly as his joints protested. Kira approached Jason, who was watching the scene with narrowed eyes. "I'll get his order," she said, already reaching for a menu. "Don't bother," Jason replied, placing a restraining hand on her arm. "He's probably just looking for a warm place to nap. Give him a glass of water and check back in 15. If he hasn't ordered anything, tell him we need the table for paying customers. But it's pouring outside, and he's soaking wet," Kira protested. "Not our problem," Jason said dismissively. "We're running a business, not a homeless shelter. And speaking of business, table 12 is still waiting for their appetizers." Kira bit her tongue, pushing down the retort that threatened to escape. She'd already received one written warning this month for insubordination, a term Jason used whenever she questioned his decisions. Another write-up, and her already precarious job would be at risk. Still, as she delivered plates to eager customers and processed payments with a smile that grew increasingly strained, her eyes kept drifting to the old man in the corner. He sat with perfect posture despite his shabby appearance, hands folded on the table, watching the controlled chaos of the diner with keen interest. No one had even brought him water. When the rush momentarily subsided, Kiara made a decision. She poured a cup of coffee and grabbed a menu, then deliberately walked to the corner booth. Up close, she could see that beneath the shabby coat was a man who once took pride in his appearance. His nails were clean and trimmed, his face recently shaved despite a few nicks. "Afternoon, sir," she said, placing the coffee in front of him. "Nasty weather we're having." The old man looked up, surprise flickering across his face before settling into a gentle smile. "Indeed it is, young lady. Indeed it is. I brought you some coffee to warm up. On the house," she added, lowering her voice. "Can I get you something to eat?" He hesitated, weathered hands wrapping around the warm mug. "I wouldn't want to cause trouble. Your manager doesn't seem too pleased with my presence." Kiara glanced over her shoulder. Jason was watching them, his mouth a thin line of disapproval. "Don't worry about him," she said with a conspiratorial wink. "How about our house chili? It's the best thing on the menu on a day like this." The old man studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for something. "Why would you do that for a stranger who walked in from the rain?" Kiara shrugged, the simple gesture carrying the weight of her life philosophy. "Because everyone deserves kindness. Especially on the hard days." "Not everyone sees it that way," he replied, his gaze drifting to the other staff members who were pointedly ignoring their interaction. "Their loss," Kiara said simply. "So, chili?" The old man's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Chili would be wonderful, thank you." Kiara nodded and headed toward the kitchen, ignoring Jason's glare. She'd pay for the meal out of her own pocket, out of tips she desperately needed for her son's winter boots. But something about the dignity in that old man's eyes made the decision easy. 10 minutes later, she placed a steaming bowl of chili in front of him, along with a basket of cornbread. "Careful, it's hot," she cautioned. "Just like life," the old man quipped, a mischievous twinkle in his eyes. As he ate, he continued to observe the restaurant with a curious attention to detail. His eyes lingered on the peeling wallpaper, the outdated cash register, the framed photograph of a younger, happier staff gathered around a distinguished-looking gentleman in front of a brand-new Harlan's table. "That's Harold Harlan," Kiara explained, following his gaze to the photo. "The founder. This place used to be something special when he ran things. Before the corporate buyout. You sound like you miss those days," the old man remarked between careful bites. "I never experienced them myself," Kiara admitted. "But the older staff, they talk about how it used to be. How he treated everyone like family." The old man nodded thoughtfully. "And now?" Kiara glanced at Jason, who was berating Brittany for some minor infraction. "Now it's just another job people hate going to." "That's a shame," the old man murmured. "A real shame." When he finished eating, Kiara brought him the check but waved it away before he could reach for it. "Like I said, this one's on me. You're one of the good ones, you know that?" the old man said softly, his eyes bright with something that might have been tears. He stood slowly, wincing again as his joints protested. Before leaving, he folded his napkin neatly and placed it on the table with a hand-drawn smiley face and the initials, HT. Then, with a nod of thanks, he shuffled toward the door and disappeared into the rain. "What did I tell you about wasting time on non-paying customers?" Jason hissed, appearing at Kiara's elbow as she cleared the table. "That's coming out of your paycheck." "Already planned on it," Kiara replied evenly. "Do that again, and it's a write-up," Jason warned. "We can't have you encouraging every vagrant in town to come in here for handouts." Kiara straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. "If I ever need a meal and no one helps me, I'd hope someone like me is around." She turned away before he could respond, tucking the napkin with the smiley face into her apron pocket. Something about those initials nagged at her memory, but with 3 new tables to serve and a shift that wouldn't end for another 4 hours, she had no time to dwell on it. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the old man's footprints as a sleek black car pulled away from the curb, its tinted windows concealing the watchful eyes within. The next morning brought clear skies but left Kira with a lingering unease. Her encounter with the old man had stirred something in her, a memory of why she'd started working at Harlan's table in the first place. Years ago, the chain had a reputation for treating both customers and employees like family. Now, that warmth had disappeared like morning dew under a harsh sun. "Mommy, are you listening?" 7-year-old Jamal tugged at her sleeve, his backpack already slung over his small shoulders. "Sorry, baby." Kira blinked away her thoughts and focused on her son. "What did you say?" "I asked if you can come to family science night on Thursday." His eyes, wide and hopeful, made her heart constrict. "We're building volcanoes." Kira checked her mental calendar. Thursday evening shift, one she couldn't afford to miss. "I'll talk to Jason about switching, okay?" "No promises, but I'll try my best." Jamal's shoulders slumped slightly, but he nodded with the resignation of a child used to disappointment. "It's okay if you can't." The guilt followed her all the way to work, settling in her stomach like a cold stone. Sometimes she wondered if all the sacrifices, the missed school events, the constant exhaustion, the indignities she swallowed daily, would ever lead anywhere better. The diner was quieter than yesterday. Rain had driven people indoors, sunshine sent them elsewhere. Kira tied her apron with practiced movements, tucking her braids neatly under her cap. As she did, something fell from her pocket, the napkin with the smiley face and initials from yesterday. "HT," she murmured, tracing the letters with her fingertip. "Talking to yourself now?" Darla, the 60-something waitress who'd been at Harlan's table for nearly 2 decades, approached with a coffee pot in hand. "First sign of cracking up, you know." Kiara smiled. "Just thinking about that old man from yesterday." "Heard about that." Darla lowered her voice. "Jason was fuming. Said you undermined his authority? By feeding someone hungry? Heaven forbid." Kiara rolled her eyes. "Kind but foolish," Darla said, not unkindly. "You're already skating on thin ice with management. Would you have turned him away?" Darla's face softened. "No, honey. But I'm old enough to not care if I get fired. You've got Jamal to think about." The morning crept by with few customers. Kira spent her time refilling salt shakers and wiping down already clean tables, her mind drifting to Thursday's science night and how she might convince Jason to let her switch shifts. At precisely 11:45 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. Brittany, half-heartedly arranging menus at the hostess stand, glanced up and froze. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows had pulled up outside, and through the windows, Kira could see 3 sharply dressed men in dark suits stepping out. They moved with the deliberate precision of Secret Service agents, surveying the parking lot before one opened the rear passenger door. "Holy shit," Brittany whispered, abandoning her usual Valley Girl effect. From the car emerged the same elderly man from yesterday, but transformed. Gone was the weathered coat and patched shoes. Instead, he wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, a blue tie that brought out the steel in his eyes, and polished Oxford shoes that gleamed in the sunlight. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and he carried a sleek wooden cane that he clearly didn't need, tapping it rhythmically as he approached the entrance. The diner fell silent as he entered, flanked by his suited companions. "Good morning," he announced, his voice carrying an authority that commanded attention. "I believe the manager is a Mr. Jason Mercer? I'd like to speak with him, please." From the back office, Jason emerged, his customer service smile already plastered on his face. "Yes, sir, I'm Jason Mercer. Welcome to Harlan's." He stopped mid-sentence, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You're from yesterday." "Indeed." The old man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I believe you were too busy to properly introduce yourself then." "Sir, if there was any misunderstanding," Jason began, his complexion paling. "No misunderstanding at all." The old man cut him off. "You were perfectly clear about your establishment's priorities. Now allow me to introduce myself properly." He extended a hand, not to Jason, but to the room at large. "Harold T., Harlan, founder of Harlan's Table and still majority shareholder. The silence in the diner deepened. Behind the counter, Darla dropped a stack of napkins. Brittany's jaw literally hung open. Manuel peeked out from the kitchen, spatula frozen in mid-flip. Jason's face performed a remarkable series of transformations: shock, disbelief, horror, and finally a desperate attempt at damage control. Mr. Harlan! What an honor! If you'd known it was me, you would have treated me with respect? Harold finished for him. That's precisely the problem, Mr. Mercer. At Harlan's Table, we believe in treating everyone with respect, not just those who might benefit us. Kira stood motionless by the coffee station, the pieces falling into place. H.T. Harold T. Harlan. The founder himself had walked into his own restaurant, disheveled and seemingly homeless, and she'd been the only one to offer him kindness. You. Harold turned, his eyes finding Kira's. You're the only one who remembered what Harlan's Table stands for. He reached into his suit pocket and withdrew the napkin she'd given him, the one with the smiley face. You're one of the good ones. He repeated his words from yesterday, but now they carried the weight of something more meaningful than a simple compliment. The assistant manager, Tom, sidled up to Kira and hissed in her ear. Why didn't you tell us who he was? I didn't know, she whispered back honestly. Don't do that again, he warned, as if she'd intentionally sabotaged them all. You could cost us our jobs. Kira met his gaze steadily. If I ever need a meal and no one helps me, I'd hope someone like me is around. She repeated her words from yesterday, loud enough for Harold to hear. The old man's eyes twinkled with approval, but beneath the twinkle was something harder. The steel of a businessman who had built an empire based on values now forgotten by those entrusted with his legacy. No, Harold said, turning back to the increasingly nervous Jason. I believe we have some matters to discuss. The atmosphere in Harlan's Table crackled with tension. Harold T. Harlan stood in the center of the diner he had founded decades ago, his presence commanding a respect that his rain-soaked appearance the day before had not. The three men in suits, who Kira now realized must be his security team and possibly legal advisors, positioned themselves strategically around the restaurant. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in your office, Mr. Mercer, Harold suggested, though his tone made it clear this was not a request. Jason nodded frantically, sweat beading on his forehead. Of course, Mr. Harlan. Right this way. He gestured toward the back hallway, then turned to the staff. Everyone back to work. Customers are waiting. But there were hardly any customers to attend to. Most had stopped eating to watch the drama unfold, phones discreetly recording what promised to be prime social media content. As Jason led Harold and his entourage toward the office, the founder paused beside Kira. I'd like you to join us, Miss Thompson, she supplied. Kira Thompson. Harold's eyebrows raised slightly. Kira, he repeated, as if the name held special significance. Please join us. Tom, the assistant manager, stepped forward. Sir, I've been with the company for 3 years. Perhaps I could offer more insight into our operations. That won't be necessary. Harold cut him off without even a glance. Miss Thompson has already shown me everything I need to know about how this location operates. Kira felt every eye in the restaurant on her as she followed Harold and Jason down the hallway. Her heart thundered in her chest. Was she about to lose her job? Had her act of kindness somehow made things worse? Inside the cramped office, Jason scrambled to clear stacks of papers from the visitors' chairs. Please have a seat. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Nothing, thank you, Harold replied, lowering himself into a chair. One of his suited companions remained standing by the door while another positioned himself behind Harold. The third placed a sleek briefcase on the desk and opened it to reveal a laptop. Pull up the footage, Charles, Harold instructed. Footage? Jason echoed, his voice cracking. Harold smiled thinly. Yes, Mr. Mercer. You see, when I sold majority control of Harlan's Table to Platinum Restaurant Group 5 years ago, I retained certain rights. Among them, The right to conduct periodic quality assurance checks however I see fit. The man called Charles turned the laptop to face them. On screen was crystal clear footage of the diner from the previous day, shot from what appeared to be a button camera on Harold's coat. Standard procedure, Harold explained, noting Kira's surprised expression. I visit 3 locations a month. Incognito, of course. Jason loosened his tie. Mr. Harlan, if I'd known. That's precisely the point, Mr. Mercer. You weren't supposed to know. Harold's voice hardened. Now, shall we review yesterday's performance? For the next excruciating 10 minutes, they watched the footage. Every dismissive comment, every sneer, every moment of neglect was captured in high definition. Jason winced as his own voice came through clearly. He's probably just looking for a warm place to nap. The footage continued, showing Brittany's rudeness, customers' mockery, and finally, Kira's approach with coffee and a kind word. When the video ended, silence filled the office. I founded Harlan's Table in 1978 with my late wife, Harold said quietly. We started with nothing but a dream and a commitment to treat every person who walked through our doors with dignity. We believed that good food served with respect could change someone's day, maybe even their life. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Jason. In 5 minutes of footage, I watched you and your staff violate every principle this company was built on. Jason's face had gone from red to ashen. Sir, I can explain. No need, Harold interrupted. The situation is quite clear. He turned to Kira. Except for you, Miss Thompson. You saw an old man in need and showed him kindness, even at risk to your own position. His eyes softened. Why? Kira straightened in her chair. Because it was the right thing to do, sir. Harold nodded, as if she'd passed some crucial test. The right thing regardless of consequences. That's exactly what Harlan's Table used to stand for. He turned back to Jason, all warmth vanishing from his expression. Mr. Mercer, your employment with Harlan's Table is terminated, effective immediately. Charles will process your final paycheck. Jason's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. You can't, the corporate office. Already contacted, said the man standing behind Harold. They've approved Mr. Harlan's decision. The regional director is on his way to oversee the transition. Harold stood, using his cane for support. Miss Thompson, would you be so kind as to walk with me? I believe we have a dining room full of curious staff and customers waiting to see what happens next. Kira rose shakily to her feet. Through the office window, she could see the staff huddled together, whispering anxiously. Brittany was frantically tapping on her phone, likely updating her social media about the unfolding drama. What happens next? Kira asked, finding her voice. Harold's eyes twinkled with the same mischief she'd glimpsed when he was disguised as a homeless man. Next, my dear, we set some things right. He gestured toward the door. After you. As they emerged from the hallway, a hush fell over the diner. All eyes turned to them, some curious, some fearful, all attentive. The power had shifted, and everyone knew it. Behind them, a shell-shocked Jason followed, escorted by one of Harold's men, while the assistant manager Tom watched with mounting dread. Harold T. Harlan stood in the middle of his namesake restaurant, surveyed the faces before him, and prepared to remake his legacy, starting with the woman who had reminded him what it stood for in the first place. Harold T. Harlan stood before the assembled staff and remaining customers of his namesake diner with the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing. His three-piece suit and silver hair gave him an almost regal presence, a stark contrast to the sodden figure who had shuffled in from the rain just 24 hours earlier. For those who haven't figured it out yet, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent restaurant. I am Harold Harlan, founder of Harlan's Table. Yesterday, I visited this location as part of my ongoing quality assurance program. A murmur rippled through the diner. Kira noticed several customers looking uncomfortable, likely remembering their own reactions to the homeless man in their midst. Since selling majority control of this company to Platinum Restaurant Group, I've watched from a distance as they've expanded aggressively, opening 30 new locations in 4 years. Harold's expression darkened. But in their pursuit of growth, they seem to have forgotten what Harlan's table stands for. Charles, the suited man with the laptop, set up a small projector that cast its light onto a blank wall near the counter. Within moments, yesterday's footage began to play for everyone to see. The color drained from Brittany's face as her voice echoed through the speakers. "Shouldn't someone call a shelter or something?" The young hostess shrank into herself as several customers shot her disapproving glances. The footage continued, showing customers whispering about the smell, Jason dismissing the old man's presence, and Tom, the assistant manager, deliberately ignoring him. Each moment of callousness was captured in painful clarity. Then came Kira's approach with coffee, her gentle conversation, and finally, the meal she paid for from her own pocket. The contrast was stark and unmistakable. When the video ended, Harold turned to face the silent room. This was once a company that prided itself on serving good food with dignity and respect to everyone who walked through our doors. My late wife and I built this business on the principle that a meal served with kindness could change someone's day. He paused, eyes scanning the room. Yesterday, only one person in this establishment remembered that. His gaze fell on Jason, who stood by the hallway, his expression a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Mr. Mercer, as I've informed you privately, your employment with Harlan's table is terminated, effective immediately. Your management style and attitudes are inconsistent with our company values." Jason's face flushed. "You can't just..." "I can and I have." Harold cut him off. "The corporate office has been notified and supports my decision fully. You may collect your personal belongings under supervision." He turned next to Tom, who was attempting to blend into the background near the coffee station. "Mr. Alvarez, as assistant manager, you had ample opportunity to demonstrate leadership yesterday. Instead, you followed Mr. Mercer's poor example and later admonished Miss Thompson for showing basic human decency. Your employment is also terminated." Tom's mouth fell open. "But I have a family. As do many of the people you've treated poorly during your time here." Harold replied, unmoved. "Perhaps this will be an opportunity for reflection." Lastly, he addressed Brittany, who was now on the verge of tears. "Young lady, you are at the beginning of your working life. The habits and attitudes you develop now will follow you throughout your career." His tone softened slightly. "I am not firing you today. Instead, I'm giving you a choice. You may resign, or you may commit to a complete reorientation in how you treat others, particularly those you deem less fortunate than yourself." Brittany nodded frantically, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I'll do better, sir. I promise." "See that you do," Harold said, then addressed the room at large. "To the customers who participated in the mockery yesterday, your business is still welcome here. But I hope you'll reflect on how quickly you judged a man based solely on his appearance." Several patrons stared at their plates, unable to meet his eyes. Harold turned to Kira, his stern expression melting into something warmer. "Miss Thompson, would you join me for a moment?" Heart pounding, Kira followed Harold to a quiet corner booth. One of his suited companions placed a leather portfolio on the table before stepping back to give them privacy. "You're trembling," Harold observed. "I don't know if I'm about to be praised or fired," Kira admitted with a nervous laugh. Harold's eyes crinkled. "Neither. You're about to be offered an opportunity." He opened the portfolio, revealing a series of documents. "Miss Thompson, do you know why I was so moved by your kindness yesterday?" Kira shook her head. "My late wife's name was Kira," he said softly, surprising her. "Kira Marie Harlan. She was working as a waitress when I met her in 1976, struggling to make ends meet, just like you. She had the same instinct to help others, regardless of who was watching or what it might cost her." He slid a photograph across the table, a beautiful black woman with a warm smile, standing proudly in front of the very first Harlan's Table location. "We built this company together. Her recipes, my business sense. Her heart, my head." Kira stared at the photograph, pieces falling into place. "The HT on the napkin. Harold and Thompson," he confirmed. "Our original logo before the marketing team convinced us to simplify. When you told me your last name was Thompson, well, I'm not usually one for signs, but this felt meaningful. Harold pulled out a contract from the portfolio. Miss Thompson, I'd like to offer you a position, not as shift manager, but as regional coordinator for employee development. You'd be responsible for training staff across the state, ensuring that the values this company was founded on are upheld in every location. Kiara's eyes widened. But I don't have a degree or management experience. You have something more valuable, Harold interrupted gently. Natural leadership, compassion, and the courage to do what's right when no one is watching, or even when people are watching and disapproving. Those qualities can't be taught in any business school. He slid the contract toward her. The position comes with a substantial salary increase, benefits, and a flexible schedule that would allow you to finish your education and be there for your son. Kiara felt lightheaded. 24 hours ago, she'd been worried about affording winter boots for Jamal. Now, a man she'd fed out of kindness was offering to change her entire life. Why? She whispered, overwhelmed. Harold's smile was tinged with both sadness and hope. Because, Miss Thompson, this company has lost its way. And I believe you're exactly the person to help find it again. Kiara stared at the contract before her, her fingertips hovering above the crisp paper as if it might disappear at her touch. The salary figure made her breath catch, more than triple what she currently earned. Benefits, retirement plan, paid vacation, things she'd never dared hope for while serving coffee and clearing plates. I understand this is overwhelming, Harold said gently. Take your time. It's just... Kiara struggled to find words. Yesterday I was worried about making rent. Today you're offering me a career that could change everything. Harold nodded. Life pivots on small moments, doesn't it? Had you ignored me yesterday, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Had I chosen another location for my visit, our paths might never have crossed. From across the diner, Kiara could see Darla watching them, curiosity and concern written across her weathered face. Jason and Tom had been escorted to collect their belongings, their sudden fall from authority casting a pall over the staff who remained. What exactly would I be doing? Kiara asked, practical concerns breaking through her astonishment. Rebuilding the soul of this company, Harold replied without hesitation. You'd start by observing each location in your region, identifying where we've strayed from our founding principles. Then you'd implement training programs to correct course. He leaned forward, passion lighting his eyes. Miss Thompson, when my wife and I opened our first diner, we created a place where every customer felt valued, regardless of their circumstances. Where staff were treated like family, not disposable labor. Somewhere along the way, that vision got lost in corporate spreadsheets and profit margins. And you think I can help restore it? I know you can. You already embody everything we once stood for. Kiara's thoughts turned to Jamal. My son will benefit tremendously, Harold finished for her. Which brings me to the second part of my offer. He withdrew another document from his portfolio. This establishes a college fund for your son. Fully funded, regardless of whether you accept the position. Kiara's hand flew to her mouth. Mr. Harlan, that's too much. It's not charity, he said firmly. Consider it an investment in the future. My wife and I never had children of our own. Establishing educational opportunities for promising young people has been my way of creating a legacy beyond brick-and-mortar restaurants. Tears welled in Kiara's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll at least consider it, Harold replied. The position also includes enrollment in our leadership training program. 2 weeks in Chicago, all expenses paid. You'd learn every aspect of the business from the ground up. Kiara's mind raced. Chicago. Leadership training. A real career path instead of a dead-end job. And most importantly, security for Jamal's future. What about this location? She asked. After today, a temporary manager will take over until we find suitable permanent replacements. Harold explained. The staff who treated people with dignity will remain. Those who didn't will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. As if on cue, The front door opened and a woman in a sharp business suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. "Ah," Harold said. "That would be Ms. Reynolds from regional headquarters. She'll oversee the transition." Kiera watched as the woman surveyed the diner with a practiced eye before approaching their table. "Mr. Harlan," she greeted with a respectful nod. "Everything's in order at the corporate level. The paperwork has been processed." "Excellent. Ms. Reynolds, this is Kiera Thompson, potentially our new regional coordinator for employee development." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly as she extended her hand to Kiera. "A pleasure. I look forward to working with you." The surreal quality of the moment intensified. Just an hour ago, regional executives were nameless, faceless authorities who issued impossible mandates from afar. Now one was shaking Kiera's hand as an equal. "I should check on my son," Kiera said suddenly. "He's at my neighbor's until my shift ends, but with all this..." "Of course," Harold agreed. "Family comes first. That's another principle this company has forgotten." He handed her a business card with his personal number. "Take the weekend to consider my offer. Call me on Monday with your decision." As Kiera gathered her things, Harold added, "One more thing, Miss Thompson." She turned back. "Your shift today will be compensated at your current rate, plus a bonus equivalent to 1 month's salary." He smiled at her astonishment. "Consider it an apology for the disruption." A month's salary. Enough to cover rent, utilities, and buy Jamal those winter boots with money to spare. Tears spilled down Kiera's cheeks before she could stop them. "Thank you," she whispered, the words wholly inadequate for the emotions swirling within her. Harold's eyes softened. "No, Miss Thompson. Thank you for reminding an old man what matters." As Kiera walked through the diner toward the exit, she felt the weight of stares, some envious, some confused, some genuinely happy for her. Darla caught her arm as she passed. "What happened?" the older waitress whispered. Kiera, still dazed, could only shake her head. "Everything," she managed. "Everything just changed." Outside, the sunshine felt different on her skin, warmer, full of promise. The same parking lot she trudged across thousands of times now seemed like the threshold to a new life. 24 hours ago, she'd been a waitress struggling to make ends meet. Now she held in her hands the opportunity to become someone with real influence, to make a difference in people's lives, just as she'd made a difference in Harold's. As Kiera reached her battered old car, she glanced back at Harlan's table, seeing it with new eyes. The faded sign, the cracked parking lot, the struggling diner that had been both her prison and her livelihood for 8 long years. For the first time in forever, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. 6 weeks later, Kiera Thompson straightened the lapel of her navy blazer as she approached the familiar storefront of Harlan's table. The peeling paint had been refreshed, the flickering neon sign replaced with a sleek, modern version of the original logo, the intertwined HT, now prominently displayed above the entrance. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. Gone were the cracked vinyl booths and stained ceiling tiles. Warm lighting cast a welcoming glow over new furnishings that somehow managed to feel both contemporary and nostalgic, honoring the diner's history while embracing its future. But the physical changes paled in comparison to the shift in atmosphere. As Kiera entered, she immediately sensed the difference: staff moving with purpose instead of resignation, genuine smiles instead of forced customer service grins, a hum of positive energy replacing the previous cloud of apathy. "Regional Coordinator Thompson," greeted Marcus, the new manager Harold had personally selected. "We weren't expecting you today." Kiera smiled. "That's the point of an unannounced visit, isn't it?" The 2 weeks of leadership training in Chicago had transformed Kiera almost as completely as the diner itself. She'd absorbed everything eagerly: financial management, conflict resolution, corporate communication, emerging with not just knowledge but confidence. The shy waitress who once apologized for existing had been replaced by a woman who commanded respect without demanding it. "How's the new training program working out?" she asked, noticing how the staff stood a little straighter in her presence, not from fear but from genuine respect. "Incredible difference," Marcus replied. Starting each shift with the table values discussion has completely changed how the team approaches their work. The table values, dignity, kindness, quality, and community, had been Harold's original guiding principles, now revived and reinforced through Kira's regional training initiative. Already, customer satisfaction scores were climbing, and staff turnover had decreased by 30% across her region. As Kira moved through the diner, she greeted each staff member by name, asking specific questions about their work and lives. Many were new hires, but a few familiar faces remained, including Darla, who now served as a mentor to newer wait staff, and surprisingly, Brittany, who had undergone a remarkable transformation of her own. "Miss Thompson!" Brittany exclaimed, the Valley Girl effect completely gone. "I just got accepted to community college. Starting business classes next semester." "That's wonderful," Kiara said warmly. "The Educational Assistance Program?" Brittany nodded enthusiastically. "I never thought I could afford college. But Mr. Harlan said if I maintained my customer service scores above 90% for 3 months, the company would help with tuition. And have you?" 97%, Brittany said proudly. "Turns out people respond well when you treat them like actual human beings." Kiara smiled. "Imagine that." As she continued her inspection, Kiara paused at a new addition to the wall near the entrance, a bronze plaque with an inscription that still brought tears to her eyes whenever she read it. "Dedicated to the everyday heroes who serve with heart, HT and Kiara." Harold had insisted on including her name, despite her protests. "You embody the spirit of this company as much as my late wife did," he told her. "Let it be an inspiration to others." Near the register, Kiara noticed a young woman with a toddler on her hip, scrutinizing the menu board with a furrowed brow. The woman's clothes were clean but worn, her expression that of someone calculating every penny. The child fussed, hungry and impatient. "I think we'll just get a side of fries to share," the woman told Marcus apologetically. "That's all we can manage today." Before Marcus could respond, Kiara stepped forward. "Why don't you add a grilled cheese for the little one and a bowl of today's soup for Mom?" "On me." The woman's eyes widened. "Oh, I couldn't." "Please," Kiara insisted gently. "Everyone deserves a good meal on a hard day." As Marcus processed the order, adding a chocolate milk for the child without charging for it, the young mother's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's been a rough week." "I understand," Kiara replied, remembering her own struggles not so long ago. "Things will get better." When the woman and child were settled in a booth, eating their unexpected meal with visible relief, Marcus joined Kiara by the counter. "That was kind of you. That's what Harlan's table stands for," she replied. "Not just serving food, but serving people with dignity." Later, as she prepared to leave, Kiara watched the young mother gathering her things, the child now content and smiling. Impulsively, Kiara approached their table one last time. "Excuse me," she said, handing the woman a business card. "We're hiring for several positions with flexible hours. If you're interested, call this number and mention that you spoke with Kiara." The woman accepted the card with trembling fingers. "Why would you help a complete stranger?" Kiara smiled, remembering a rainy day and an old man in a weathered coat. "Because you're one of the good ones," she said softly. Outside, the late afternoon sun gilded the renovated facade of Harlan's table. Kiara paused, taking in the transformation of the restaurant, of herself, of the lives she now had the power to touch. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jamal's school. "Family science night starts in 30 minutes. Don't forget the volcano supplies." For the first time in years, Kiara didn't have to make excuses, didn't have to miss another milestone. Her new position gave her not just financial stability, but the freedom to be present for her son's life. As she walked to her new car, a practical but comfortable sedan that had replaced her unreliable old hatchback, Kiara reflected on how completely her world had changed because of one simple act of kindness. A meal offered without expectation of return. A moment of dignity extended to a stranger. A small decision that had rippled outward, transforming not just her life but countless others. She slid behind the wheel, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman who gazed back, confident, purposeful, hopeful, barely resembled the exhausted waitress who had once seen no way forward. That woman had given a meal to a hungry man, never imagining how profoundly that simple act would change her world. "You're one of the good ones," she whispered to herself, starting the engine. Then she drove toward her son's school, toward their future, toward a life remade by kindness.